The courtroom air was suffocating, thick with whispers and the unspoken tension of broken vows and shattered trust. People leaned forward in their wooden benches, eyes darting between the frail woman standing alone and the confident, smirking figure seated proudly beside the man who was once her husband. Suddenly, a sharp gasp broke through the silence as the pregnant woman swayed unsteadily, clutching her swollen belly. Her knees buckled, her body gave into exhaustion, and she collapsed onto the cold marble floor with a hollow thud. The sound echoed across the chamber like a crack of thunder, pulling shocked gasps from the audience. A collective murmur rose, the kind that fills the air when tragedy unfolds before helpless eyes. Some rose from their seats, others pressed hands to their lips in disbelief. Yet, amid the chaos, one woman didn't move. She didn't flinch, didn't show even a shadow of concern. Instead, she crossed her slender legs with poise, her crimson lips curving into a cruel, satisfied smile. Selina, the mistress, sat back comfortably, as though the suffering of the pregnant wife was nothing more than an entertaining spectacle. Her eyes glittered with arrogance, convinced that the war had already been won. The judge banged his gavel firmly, his voice commanding silence. Order returned, but the emotions in the room burned hotter than ever. And in that moment, a story of betrayal, pain, and resilience began to unravel, a story that no one present would ever forget. Before we step further into this storm of love, betrayal, and truth, I want to pause and ask you something. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the power of truth always rising above lies, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Royal Stories. Together, we keep stories like this alive, stories that remind us all of the strength within the human heart. The woman who had fainted was Aisha, a name spoken with quiet respect by those who knew her before this nightmare began. She wasn't a woman of wealth or grandeur, but she carried herself with grace, her kindness touching everyone who crossed her path. 6 years earlier, she had married Daniel, a man who once seemed to embody every dream she had carried since childhood. Their love story had been simple, tender, and filled with hope. They weren't rich, but they had each other, and for Aisha, that had always been enough. She believed in Daniel with all her heart, trusted him blindly, and built a home on the foundation of their vows. But time has a cruel way of testing the strongest bonds. Daniel's job in finance kept him late at work, his excuses growing thin, his distance harder to ignore. Aisha, carrying his child, noticed the way his laughter no longer filled their home, how his touch grew cold, and how his gaze seemed to drift elsewhere. She fought against the dread that clawed at her chest, convincing herself he was simply stressed, that marriage had seasons, and that love would bring them back together. The truth, however, was darker than her kind heart could imagine. Daniel had fallen into the arms of Selina, a woman who thrived on allure and ambition. Selina was everything Aisha was not: bold, daring, and ruthless. Where Aisha's love was steady and selfless, Selina's was manipulative, designed to consume rather than to give. She whispered poison into Daniel's ears, convincing him that his marriage was a trap, that Aisha's pregnancy was nothing but a desperate chain to hold him hostage. By the time the affair surfaced, Daniel was already ensnared. The man who once vowed to protect Aisha turned his back on her, his trust shattered by Selina's lies. He filed for divorce, standing by Selina's side as though Aisha were the enemy instead of the woman carrying his child. And so, their heartbreak became a public spectacle, dragging them all into the merciless light of the courtroom. On the first day of trial, Aisha entered wearing a simple dress stretched over her growing belly. Her eyes were swollen from nights of endless tears, but her spine remained straight. She had no lawyer with an expensive suit, no one to smooth her trembling words. She stood alone, holding onto the truth like a lifeline. Across the room, Selina walked in like a queen, her heels clicking confidently against the polished floor. She wore designer clothes, her perfume filling the air, her arm possessively looped through Daniel's. She smiled at the whispers around her, as if enjoying the performance. Every question fired at Aisha in court cut her deeper. She was accused of scheming, of manipulation, of inventing her pregnancy as a weapon. Selena's mocking eyes followed her every word, silently daring her to break. And yet, Aisha refused to crumble. She reminded the judge of her vows, of her loyalty, of the nights she sat waiting for her husband to return while he was in Selena's arms. She spoke of the love they once shared, not to win him back, but to prove that what they had was real, and that her unborn child was the proof of that love. Daniel sat beside Selena, his jaw clenched, his eyes deliberately avoiding Aisha's. The woman he had once loved now looked like a stranger to him, weighed down by hurt. But in the shadows of his eyes, a flicker of doubt lived, a doubt he fought to ignore, because acknowledging it meant confronting his own betrayal. The pressure of it all bore heavily on Aisha. Months of emotional torment, sleepless nights, humiliation in the eyes of the community, and the physical toll of pregnancy collided with the unbearable stress of proving her own innocence. That was why her body failed her that day in court, collapsing under the weight of it all. As the paramedics rushed to her aid, Aisha refused to leave. Her voice, though weak, carried across the chamber as she whispered, "I will not go until the truth is heard." Her words silenced the murmurs, her determination piercing through her frailty. Even the judge, seasoned and unshaken after decades on the bench, found himself watching her with something more than professional distance. He had seen liars cry, manipulators pretend, and victims plead. But Aisha's desperation carried a sincerity that could not be feigned. Selena's smile that day was one of pure triumph, the kind of smirk born from arrogance. She believed science would never betray her lies, that the narrative she had spun was unbreakable. But the judge knew better. His years had taught him that lies might weave a net, but truth always tears it apart. And so, with a voice heavy with authority, he ordered what would become the turning point of this tragic case. "A DNA test will be conducted," he declared, his gavel striking the bench with finality. The words hung in the air, a silent promise that truth was coming, no matter how hard the guilty tried to bury it. And as the courtroom emptied that day, Aisha's trembling figure stood a little taller. She had no wealth, no allies, and no strength left to give, but she had the truth. And that truth was about to change everything. The day the DNA results were read, the courtroom was so silent you could hear the shuffling of papers and the nervous breaths of those gathered. Aisha sat quietly at her table, her hands resting protectively on her belly, her eyes closed as though she were whispering a silent prayer. Across from her, Selena lounged with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, her legs elegantly crossed, her polished nails tapping on the wood of the bench. Daniel sat beside her, his posture stiff, his face betraying the inner war between loyalty to his mistress and the faint, haunting memory of the love he had once shared with his wife. When the judge opened the sealed envelope and his eyes scanned the report, the tension broke like an invisible thread snapping in the air. His voice rang out, calm yet thunderous in its impact. "The DNA test confirms without any doubt that Daniel is the biological father of Aisha's unborn child." A wave of murmurs and gasps filled the courtroom. Some whispered, others shook their heads at the weight of the revelation. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Selena's smirk faltered, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. Her painted lips parted, but no words came out. The confidence she had worn like armor shattered instantly, leaving behind only shock and humiliation. Aisha sat still, her lips trembling as tears rolled down her cheeks. This was not victory in the way Selena or even Daniel might have seen it, it was vindication. It was the truth she had carried in her heart finally spoken aloud for all to hear. It was the proof she had clung to when no one believed her, the answer to her prayers whispered late at night. She lowered her head, not in arrogance, but in relief, her tears falling silently onto her hands. Daniel's face was a portrait of shame. His eyes, which had so often looked at Aisha with love, now struggled to meet hers. He shifted in his seat, his shoulders hunched, as though the weight of the truth had finally crushed his pride. For months, he had doubted her, cast her aside, and chosen to believe the venom of another woman over the loyalty of his own wife. Now the truth burned him like fire, exposing not just Selina's deceit, but his own weakness. Selina, however, was not one to surrender easily. She forced a bitter laugh, attempting to mask her unraveling composure. "So what? A child doesn't erase the fact that your marriage is dead," she sneered, her voice cracking as her mask slipped. But the judge's eyes, stern and unyielding, cut through her words. "This court does not tolerate deceit or cruelty," he said firmly, silencing her attempts. "Aisha has been wronged not only as a wife but as a mother. And today, justice stands with her." His words were not just a verdict but a rebuke, a reminder that lies may flourish for a time, but truth always finds its voice. The crowd buzzed again, some in sympathy for Aisha, others in quiet disapproval of Daniel and Selina. Reporters scribbled notes, their pens capturing every detail of the dramatic downfall of a love triangle that had shocked the community. But for Aisha, none of that mattered. She wasn't thinking of headlines or whispers. She thought only of the tiny life inside her, the child who had been mocked and doubted, now proven real in the eyes of everyone who had once turned against her. Daniel finally rose from his seat, his voice low, broken, almost pleading. He turned to Aisha, tears threatening to fall. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his words barely audible. "I should have believed you. I let you down when you needed me most." But Aisha did not answer. She looked at him with eyes full of sorrow but also strength, the kind of strength born from surviving betrayal. In her heart, forgiveness was not something to be given lightly. Trust, once shattered, could not be pieced together overnight. She carried not only the scars of his betrayal but also the newfound determination to live for herself and for her child, not for a man who had doubted her worth. The courtroom slowly emptied, leaving behind echoes of all that had transpired. Selina slipped out hurriedly, her pride in ruins, her once gleaming confidence reduced to whispers of scandal and disgrace. Daniel lingered, watching Aisha as though searching for a way back to the love he had destroyed. But she did not linger for him. She rose slowly, her movements steady despite the exhaustion that weighed on her, and walked out with her head held high. For the first time in months, she felt something like freedom. Outside the courthouse, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the steps. Aisha paused for a moment, lifting her face to the light, her hand resting protectively over her belly. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. Raising a child alone was no small burden, and the whispers of society would not vanish overnight. But she also knew she was stronger than she had ever been. The storm had battered her, but it had not broken her. Daniel approached cautiously, his voice soft, desperate. He spoke of regret, of wanting to make amends, of promising to stand by her and their child now that the truth was known. But Aisha's silence was more powerful than any words. She finally turned to him and spoke with quiet firmness. "You believed lies over love. You left me to fight alone when I needed you most. This child is my future, Daniel, and I will raise it with dignity, with or without you." Her words cut deeper than any verdict the judge had given, for they were the truth of her heart. Daniel lowered his head, realizing that some wounds could never be healed by apologies alone. He had lost more than a court case, he had lost the trust of the woman who once gave him everything. In the days that followed, Aisha's story spread far and wide, becoming a symbol of resilience and truth. People who once doubted her came forward with apologies and admiration. Mothers whispered her name to their daughters as a lesson in strength, while others saw in her the reminder that lies may wound, but truth always heals. For Aisha, the journey ahead was not about bitterness or revenge. It was about rising from the ashes of betrayal, about giving her child the love and stability that had been denied to her in those dark months. She built a new life, one where her worth was no longer tied to a man's belief or society's approval, but to the truth she carried within herself. And as she prepared to welcome her child into the world, she did so with a heart scarred yet unbroken, ready to write a new chapter defined not by betrayal, but by resilience and love. Dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel the sting of betrayal, the relief of truth, and the courage of a woman who refused to be broken, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Royal Stories. Your support keeps these powerful, emotional stories alive. Special request: before you go, drop a comment below. Do you believe Aisha should give Daniel another chance for the sake of their child, or should she walk away and build her future without him? Your voice matters, and I can't wait to hear what you think.